whole note.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole lot of time there. So I'll be positioning myself very carefully to be able to catch you out of the
Okay.
peripheral.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay, and this anti, we're not doing it. You're doing the anti one.
Yeah,
Yes,
we
yeah,
are.
we're doing everything. That's the
But we're
last
going to
one.
do
That's
that
the
at the
last
end.
one. That's
Yeah.
the last one.
Oh, okay.
So Donald, you were asking me about the first piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, the boss says he wants that acapella. Me
Okay.
acapella.
So anti is going to be at the
It's
very,
hard to
very
get.
end.
It's hard because it's like you hear your voice. Like, no, I want to go. No,
Yeah.
not for you.
And this one is.
You're good.
Yeah, I don't have much light
I
here,
wonder
but
if we can. You know what? We can probably get you like a stand light. I bet you. There's one in my bass case. You want to go get it? I'll show you. I'll tell you where it is. My case is around the corner and the like. We don't need to. That's like
That's
Carl's
what.
cat.
That's Bukas, right? That's the thing I'm reading acapella in the beginning.
Bukas.
Yeah, I'm reading that in the beginning.
Okay. And then
If you need a stand light,
And then
I can. It's gonna be hard for me to explain to you, but I don't know. I don't know how to get out of here. So if you can see it.
Let's see, did JJ show up? JJ? No? Jeff Bellerose? Yep. Okay, that's who you do. I see. Okay. Claudia isn't here yet. Janice isn't here yet. And Paula is not here yet. So we're going to say 2, 3, 5, 6 seats. There's 2, there's 1, there's 1. That's 4, 5, 6. So that's good. Anything that doesn't maybe good. Outside. Okay. So there's
base case I
better
didn't
right
see.
here.
But it's okay.
It's in that room in the corner. And if you look at like if this is the
When
bass
I was
case,
lightheaded,
right here there's a
Why don't I
small
take those
pocket,
as
two
I
things?
might,
and there'll be a music
I
stand
might be
right there.
leaning on
Just
the
close it
keyboard.
out.
Is
You
that
don't have a
okay?
bunch of crap. But I think
Okay, we can let this show
Okay, that's good.
begin, I think. I'm going to adjust the mood lighting just a little bit.
Oh, yes.
you need less mood.
As if they improvise a
Once that
You got
bow,
nothing.
once that bow gets happening, mood lighting comes in.
what's up? Need anything in the monitor or anything, you know
I
where
like
I
that the bow has become a metaphor for all kinds of weird acts now.
Oh, I'm going to turn off that one little light.
There's a reason we give you a mic.
I miss the old days. I used to have to climb up on the ladder to do that. I feel so like
Yeah, I think I got it.
ridiculous.
Close it.
You're all set?
Yeah, and I want to go to the bathroom real quick.
Alright, so
Make sure the batteries are working.
if Andy, if you want to make that visible to the universe, Andy, yeah, you want to make that visible to the world?
We'll put it on top.
Oh, did you want light? You guys,
That'd be good.
I swear.
Put it on top.
Okay.
You're good. Or you put it on top of the stand. On the top.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Okay, that's better.
Looking down like antenna.
We kind of have a little
I think that'll
drama.
help you.
This music itself is very undramatic, you'll see. The most mellow.
Well, he's
We're
the boss.
starting.
He's the boss.
Okay,
Awesome.
so we're gonna.
Percussion.
But Jordan's
Wants to make a pit
Lewis
stop.
is doing
I think Eric, we're gonna like yeah, we're just gonna take 1 second.
Cool.
1 sec.
That's so crazy.
Jesus Christ. Can you put this right there? Yeah, just point it at us. Just a back. It's a backup. Other nope, absolutely not.
That stage lighting that you're banging your head in.
This is a good time to tell knock knock
jeez.
jokes, Carl.
Sorry, what?
It's a good time to tell knock knock jokes.
You have a good one?
Arnold. Like I'm not gonna do it. I'm sorry. He'll get mad at me. I get too silly. I'm just gonna be serious.
Oh, okay.
But yes, I've been collecting music knock knock jokes for moments like this. Like really bad ones.
Is it possible to go straight through? That actually might be cool.
Yeah.
I don't want to test your stamina, but it'll work
Okay.
better that way.
So,
Yeah.
3 hours, folks. Get ready. No, we'll get you out of here by
We have to
then.
do warm-ups.
Okay. Without that break, it's going to just rock it loud. Anyway, we're very pleased to have you here. Thank you, Carl. Thank you for bringing the band. Thank you for bringing
Thanks to Eric and Bird and Beckett.
yeah.
I'm assuming most of you have been here before. This space is absolutely invaluable. We were just talking about Red Poppy, and then we're talking about Bird and Beckett, and it's about like the cats actually come out to play here. If you think about the volume of great music that comes to the Bay Area and the legacy of music in the Bay Area, it's really humbling thinking that like in these spaces, these neighborhood spaces, this is where so much of the music really happens. And I think that's a powerful thing. Because as we've talked about over the course of our time in the music, community action, community empowerment, those sorts of things are important. This is sort of like a small little curtain call for a project that got started in the midst of COVID, actually prior to that. So when I started at Mills College, it was under the pretense that I would write not a dissertation. I'm not a doctor. I would write a master's thesis on the Blue Notes, which were a group of South African exiles who emigrated to Europe in the midst of apartheid. I'm going to name them all here. There was 2 saxophonists, Dudu Pokwana, Nick Moyake, trumpet player Mongezi Feza, bassist Johnny Gianni, piano player Chris McGregor, and my friend, a drummer named Louis Maholo Maholo. And I was obsessed with this music because I saw in this music a connectivity between the character of culture, the character of tradition, because they were doggedly South African. I saw in that music a connection between that and the aggressive, free music that I was obsessed with when I was a teenager. And so in 2018, under the auspices of a number of individuals, including my friend, piano player Alexander Hawkins, I went out to Europe and I recorded with Louis. And I remember when the session was coming to a halt, it was a really gigantic psychodrama for me. It was this gigantic source of panic because I was playing with one of my idols. We were standing outside and he said, "You're from California, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "I'd love to come back to California." And then the day that ended, and I was in a taxi drive home with my partner and wife and collaborator, Rei Scampavia, I said, I'm getting that guy to California. I just thought to myself, I'm getting him to California. And we got the grant, and we got Alex and Louis's cooperation, and it was all ready to go. And then 2020 happened. And COVID occurred. All the venues closed down. We were driving home on Grand Avenue in Oakland, another community area, right near the theater. I remember we had just passed Grand Lake Theater. And my wife's like, she's a scientist. She says, you know, if this is really the kind of threat that people are talking about, everything's going to close down. I'm like, no, absolutely, that's not going to happen. See, if we were to close down, that would mean schools would close. We wouldn't be able to get groceries in person. Like we wouldn't have any shows. That's absolutely insane. That afternoon, everything closed down. So then it got delayed, and it got delayed again, and it got delayed again, and it got delayed again, and eventually Louis just couldn't make it for a number of reasons. He actually passed away a couple months back, and it was this gigantic Moby Dick moment for me, which I just thought to myself, like, I'm never gonna. I've just been chasing this white whale of realizing this guy's afternoon dream of coming back to California. And fortunately, I was able to connect with a friend of mine and a hero, the great Andrew Sorrell. He's one of my favorite people. I think he's an amazing person. But Andrew stepped in for Louis. And eventually, in 2021, we were able to premiere a version of that project with essentially this band, and with Andrew and Louis's place at O-Town Jazz Workshop in Oakland. And then I thought to myself, well, we had to do this social distancing thing. We should do it again now that people can come to concerts. So in 2023, we recorded the record that we're releasing now. And Andrew can't make it because he's too busy being Andrew Sorrell. Fortunately, we have the great Donald Robinson stepping in for him. And yes, let's give it up for Donald. And the record came out actually in August 22. I just wanted to do a little bit of service to the record and sort of memorialize this process because, as you know, music is a process. And this predates us. This entire endeavor started long before we got here. God willing, it's going to be here long after we're done. In Louis's time, South Africans were facing the specter of apartheid, which annihilated tribal communities and oppressed killed countless black South Africans. And today, just like then, we're dealing with apartheid. This time it's in Gaza, the apartheid in Palestine, right? So things don't really change. You'll have people playing free music today that were playing free music, you know, decades ago. So this is just a blip in the long lineage, the long timeline of political activism and the long timeline of music. This is just one of many things. And that's great. I'm glad you're here because you're here for part of the process. And we're just going to add some ticker tape to the process. So without any further ado, we're not going to take any breaks. I mean, we will after songs. I'm not going to go insane. But we're not gonna take a set break. We're gonna start with another one of my heroes. This is the great Louis Jordan.
That's what I'm sure of, man. I'm sure. I'm really sure of this thing. And as I say, there are things which, as far as spirituality is concerned, which is very important to me at this time, I've got to grow through certain phases of this to other understanding and more consciousness and awareness of just what it is that I'm supposed to understand about. And I'm sure others will be part of this music. To me, you know, I feel I want to be a force for good.
Andy, can we get a little, just a touch of guitar on the monitor, just a little bit, just a little bit of guitar on the monitor, tiny bit.
What's good? What makes you feel like your design? My mind clicks at a time, that's how I know it's mine. All our oldest crimes absolved in gospel, solve impossible designs. Flying blinds, I'm awful with it. Unlawful, I'm a criminal. My charge is looking like I'm cynical. I'm not just visceral. My viscera's not invisible, especially when I'm loud or even miserable. Except when people say they're lying. And I'm honest, man. When honesty's feeling like a sideshow, like, where is my mind? What's good? What makes you feel like you're designed? I got a plaything, man, but it's as serious as your life. I got a plaything, man, but it's as serious as your life. I heard they let their people starve just for a shot at being right. Man, I got a kid and a wife. I check my bills because they fly by night. You know my cut is just another form of petty theft. I stick with this like Wookiees got a life debt. Yeah, but art's priceless. Yeah, but art's priceless. This is priceless. Value like a Dollar Tree price list. Can't decide if making noise makes you a god, or ISIS, or viceless. What's the worth of a man in crisis when he's a spectacle for countless? All my fathers had this. If you have gold and you be Midas. If you have it in you, maybe you be mindless. Maybe you be mindless. Maybe you be mindless. Maybe you be mindless. Like, where is my mind? What's good? What makes you feel like you're designed? I got a plaything, man, but it's as serious as your life. I got a plaything, man, but it's as serious as your life.
is called high temperature. Get a touch more bass in the monitor, please. Thank you. Let me get some water. How's everyone doing out there? We all need water. No, it's I'll count this in. It starts with a keyboard solo. This next piece features Rei Scampavia.
Oh, I see. I guess. Yeah.
Sorry, stayed longer than I expected.
We were doing a session. Ray and I were recently out east. We had a sextet, which was sort of this band that kind of came out of the wildfires in Los Angeles. It was me, Ray, Bobby Bradford, William Roper, the bassist Luke Stewart, and Andrew Searle. And so we're sitting there at the session, and we're doing sound check, and David Murray shows up. And he stays there for like 7 hours. He does nothing other than hang. Didn't bring his horn, nothing. And I felt bad because we're sitting there and we're having our snacks. Ray got donut holes. I remember Luke Stewart comes in. He's like, "We got donuts," and I never got any. I never got donuts. And Bobby and David and Andrew would sit there, and they had photos of like the 1970s and 60s, just showing this was Sonny Murray, this was blah blah blah. And every time they started talking, I had to look at my phone and make sure we didn't go over like 10 minutes because like we had to do the session. We were on a clock. So someone would drop this like really insane story about the nature of harmonics and what it really means, which is in jazz terms, it's like the equivalent of someone telling you what the secrets of the universe are. And I'd look over at Bobby, I'm like, I'm really sorry, but we got to go back into the studio. So I bring this up because Ray was wingmanning me the whole time and making sure I stayed on the clock. So just make sure. I think while we were loading out, Andrew walks up to Ray and he says, man, Karl couldn't do anything without you, huh? We got our waters?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm just
I feel bad you didn't get a donut. Would you like a glass of water?
I'm fine.
good.
Thank you.
I'm good.
Thank you, Francis.
Oh, you have your
Yeah, confirm the truth.
Would you like a cup?
I'm just gonna give a general downbeat for this one.
Thank you.
No count in, just downbeat. This is Louis Jordan. It's Francis Wong. We're at the halfway point. The next pieces are shorter. Andy, can you get just a touch more guitar on the monitor? Just a little bit. All right, this next piece is called Walking Eiler and Tarzana. Thank you. This next piece, years ago I put together a piece of music called Taglish. It was supposed to be about basically the Filipino-American experience, Taglish, speaking Tagalog and English. And I recently premiered out east a new piece called Taglish 2, which is about the depressing circumstances of being an immigrant in America in 2025. More desultory. But every part of Taglish was meant to be centered on a specific family member. And in 2022, Ray and I had a son, Malcolm Lewis. He's probably going to be one of the greatest musicians who ever lived. Or he's going to be like an investment banker and make like a ton of money. I have no idea. Anyway.
One after the other, right?
Same time. So it is. He's going to fund a record label with all that Wall Street money. You guys know what I'm talking about. This is one of his pieces. This is called Mama and Papa. This is our penultimate piece. Or Bird and Beckett, so we're using words like penultimate. This was written for Louis Maholo, who passed away recently, whom we discussed earlier. I talked to him, first time I met him. I kept asking him, what's the music for? He says, to free South Africa. And then you'd kind of try to detour him into some other direction. He's just like, it's to free South Africa. I'm trying to explain this to you. And then I asked him, like, so what kind of explicit revolutionary activity were you involved in? And he's like, well, you know, it was part of the revolutionary wing of the ANC. It derailed trains. And I remember very explicitly, he says, I derailed trains, and he paused, and he's like, leans into the recorder, he says, no one got killed. I like that. No one got killed is a good, like, name for a record. You ready? This is our final piece. Let me introduce the band. This is Rei Scampavia on keys, Louis Jordan on alto saxophone and voice, Francis Wong on tenor saxophone, Lisa Mezzacappa on bass, Donald Robinson on drums. I'm Karl Evangelista. We have a new record out on called Bukas. A lot of this music back when Andrew was out here in 23. I think there are copies up front. You can find it online, 577records.bandcamp.com. That's out of the way. Who sees this other than people who know? So I'm going to say something. Santana once said about Sonny Chirac, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, "You have to be willing to die to sound like that." I'm not the hugest Santana guy, but I agreed with that basic sentiment, which is that in times that are desperate, the art has an obligation to reflect the circumstances of society at large. I believe that in my heart. And a lot of people don't like putting political content. They don't like putting context. And this is not by way of demeaning that or undermining the artistic process, which should, if freedom is free, then art is, in its own way, not under any direct obligation to reflect social circumstances. I say this by way of meaning that if you feel it in your bones, as many of us have over the course of history, and the obligations of music, dating back to pre-Western times, the societies that many of us emanate from. If you feel it in your bones, you shouldn't be afraid to speak out. We have an administration right now that desperately wishes to make us afraid. And if you're up on your Chomsky, you know that this is absolutely not new. America has been committing war crimes and supporting apartheid and damaging people all over the world, the global south, for centuries. Donald Trump is merely the newest incarnation of that. And the big thing that he did different is that he turned it inward toward his own citizens in an explicit way. So it's a mask-off moment for a society that also birthed people like Reagan and Nixon. And by virtue of that, to be completely fair, also Biden and Obama, and so on and so forth. No one has their hands free. Go ask Syria. So this is all by way of saying I'm going to end this with that spiel because I have this platform right now, and who's going to dox me? A free jazz musician, right? Who cares, right? You know what I mean? So if you live under these circumstances, use your platform, because in times of desperation, it requires a bottom to top effort. It is not top down. There's a famous phrase: one must first be a revolutionary before one may be a pacifist. And when society is suffused with violence, it behooves you to disassemble that violence, and then we can live in a pacifistic society. John Coltrane believed that. He's not as loudmouthed as me, right? But if you listen, go find. A lot of these words are taken from an interview that Coltrane had with Frank Kofsky in 1966 before he passed away. I believe it's 66. Someone correct me if it's 67. I believe it's 66. And Coltrane advocated for music that was a force for real good. He said that. A dude said, that's something Superman says, right? But he was a saxophone player. And all I'm saying is that I have a guitar, he has a saxophone, you have a keyboard, and so on and so forth, We, in our own way, are participating in this struggle, which just does not end. It's aspirational, and if we don't have aspiration, really, what is the point of this on a Saturday night, and so on and so forth? So thank you so much for being here. Thanks to Bird and Beckett for keeping it real. Thanks to Andy for running sound. Thanks to all of you for being here and sticking with it. All of you online, to the CIA and FBI that have placed me on their watch list, pick up my record. You might like it. When I get taken into custody, maybe we can jam. This is called Anti.
earthly reason to speak, only suffering. A humid day's walk to the station to canvass strange opinions on power made law. To solicit a radical improvement in the human condition. Modestly and with compulsive honesty. I did not move for expediency. There'll be no immolation of truth. I am an expression of my pulse, whether fleet or slowed to a deathly crawl. You want my advice? Get rich quick or banish your inward revulsion. You must not be as I was, but as I tried to be. When I know a man's sound, I know that man. I don't know the phrases. Call it anything. Call it anti. Incongruity is a higher ideal. Noise, an antithesis, an instrument of change for the betterment of kind. Anti. My voice is anti. My arms turn counterclockwise. My melody in retrograde. I spiral inward. Outside, my speech is slurred. Inside, I am anti. To kill myself, to know myself. Sound my higher frequencies. Sound my higher frequencies. Sound my higher frequencies. begets arrogance. Arrogance dispels true power, which is to be part of all. To be part of all is to understand with humility and desperate sincerity. I am not your president. I am not your precedent. I am anti. An instrument of change for the betterment of kind. You know, I want to be a force for real good. In other words, I know that there are bad forces, forces put here that bring suffering to others and misery to the world. But I want to be the force which is truly for good. You know, I want to be a force for real good. In other words, I know that there are bad forces, forces put here that bring suffering to others and misery to the world. But I want to be the force which is truly for good.
Thank you. Have a great evening. Stay safe out there. Thanks for listening.
Yes, we'll be sending you postcards to wherever you self-deport to.